There's a clock being built inside a mountain in West Texas, but don't get too excited. It's not actually a useful clock. Not a clock that helps aircraft navigate or synchronizes communications or advances scientific research. It's not one of those actually useful clocks, so, remain calm. It's simply a giant mechanical clock inside a mountain designed to run for 10,000 years. It's reportedly costing around $42 million. And surprise, surprise, it's being funded by Jeff Bezos. Because apparently, when you've accumulated $250 billion, buying another yacht is insufficiently imaginative. Sometimes you just need to hollow out a mountain and put a cuckoo clock inside it instead. The project is called, rather unimaginatively in my opinion, the 10,000 Year Clock. It was conceived by Danny Hillis and promoted by the Long Now Foundation as a monument to long-term thinking. After a global search where thousands of criteria were considered, it just happens to have been built in the middle of nowhere, close to the ranch owned by Jeff Bezos. I know, I was amazed too. What a fucking coincidence. It uses titanium, sapphire, quartz and all sorts of components, and it's hundreds of feet tall. The mechanism is synchronized by sunlight and powered partly by changes in temperature. And some poor bastard has to wind it up every so often for 10,000 years. Hundreds of highly skilled people have reportedly worked on it. Engineers have designed special mechanisms. Workers have blasted tunnels, cast bells, and cut a spiral staircase in a solid rock. So that once a year, a clock inside a mountain that no one will ever see will go boing. That's not the punchline, by the way. That is the project. By the way, the widely reported figure is $42 million. Now, the FT does report that neither Hillis nor Bezos will actually agree as to how much it is. And they don't actually know if it's complete yet. So for $42 million may not even be the final pointless act. It could well be just the deposit. The long now argument. Now, let us be fair to the people building this thing. Their argument is not that humanity urgently needs a more complicated way of discovering what year it is. Their argument is that the clock will encourage us to think beyond quarterly earnings, election cycles, and our own lifetimes, apparently. Danny Hillis described it primarily as a work of imagination. A visit is intended to be transformational. The clock is supposed to connect us to unborn generations and encourage us to think seriously about how the next 10,000 years will play out. That's the sales pitch. And long-term thinking is important. Government should think beyond the next election. Companies should think beyond the next quarter. Society should invest in infrastructure, education, health, scientific research and environmental protection whose benefits will last for generations. I completely agree with that model. What I cannot understand is how any rational person gets from that perfectly sensible observation to, let's put a gigantic clock inside a mountain in the middle of fucking nowhere. That's not long-term thinking, that's bullshit. The Foundation's own words destroy its case. The most devastating criticism of the clock does not come from me or anyone else. It comes from the Long Now Foundation's own description of it. They say the clock may be operational within the next few years, but they do not know whether it will ever be completed. They don't know what the final costs will be. They've not established how public visits will work. Don't worry, they're not going to work. There won't be any. The site is far from roads and surrounded by extreme desert terrain. Reaching it involves narrow passages, caves, cliffs, hanging chain ladders. It's over 500 miles from Austin or Dallas. So let's be realistic. Unless you have a helicopter and happen to own the ranch next door, you're not going to see it. But there might eventually be a virtual tour. Maybe. Although, to be fair, they haven't actually committed to that either. And considering they've been working on this since 1999, you'll forgive me if I remain somewhat skeptical on this one. And then comes the most extraordinary admission of all. Hillis says that what much of the clock achieves could be gained simply by hearing its story. Think about that for a moment. The primary benefit of a $42 million machine can largely be achieved by telling people someone built it. Genius. They could have just written the story down. They could have made a film. fuck it. You could just tell people you built it and save about $41,999,957. In fact, they already did build a prototype. One's in London Science Museum if you want to go and see it. But apparently the message, please think about the future, lacked sufficient gravitas, unless it was delivered through several hundred feet of excavated billionaire-owned bullshit. You do not need $42 million underground machine to communicate an idea. That's what language is for. Their foundation effectively admits that the clock's main product is a metaphor. It is not a public monument. The clock's defenders compare it with the pyramids, the Taj Mahal, Stonehenge or cathedral. But the pyramids were visible. The Taj Mahal is visible. Stonehenge is visible. There's a parking lot there. And there's some irony in the realization that the pyramids were built by slaves. The builders of the Taj Mahal were murdered by the guy who set up the project to make certain no one else built another one. And billions of desperately poor people starved in the very shadows of those magnificent cathedrals. Unless you forget, Stonehenge was also a clock, but that was a useful one that helped people know when to plant crops. This clock is none of that. And the true irony appears to be lost on these billionaires. Public monuments occupy public space. Millions of people encounter them. They become part of a shared culture. But this clock is deliberately hidden. It's on private land, in difficult terrain, far from roads, behind an experience apparently designed to resemble an especially pretentious corporate retreat. You squeeze through a narrow slot, you enter a cave, you pass through an airlock, you leave the ordinary world behind. That's code for no poor people. Because of course you do. Because nothing says democratic concern for future generations quite like an invitation-only pilgrimage across a billionaire's private property. This is not a monument for humanity. It's an exclusive theme park for people who use the phrase deep time without laughing or weeping. What does it actually achieve? Here's the question no one seems willing to ask, let alone answer. What measurable difference has the clock made? How many government decisions have changed because of it? How many companies have abandoned destructive short-term incentives? How many communities have become more resilient? How many children have been educated or pulled out of poverty? And how many lives have been improved, apart from the people who built the damn thing? The answer offered by the foundation is essentially that some people have heard about the clock and thought, gosh, 10,000 years is a long time. $2 million, and the only measurable return is gosh, apparently. If the clock changes public policy, it worked. That's their contention. If it inspires engineers, it worked. If somebody writes a children's book about it, it worked. If no one can visit the mystery, it makes it more powerful. If it's never completed, that merely proves it's evolving. If nobody is present when it chimes, apparently the clock is ringing just for the fun of it. An unheard bell inside an empty mountain is not an impact metric. It is simply the metaphor rich people with zero imagination or empathy. Now let's spend the money differently. Let us take the reported $42 million and do something genuinely radical with it. Let's think really long term. So let's suppose we place that money into a professionally managed educational endowment. Using the most conservative model, the fund distributes about 4% of its value each year. That produces a little under $2 million a year. And assuming that we employ teachers for about $100,000 a year, all in, including salary, health insurance, retirement, everything it takes to employ great people, long term. This is not poverty wage teaching model. It's a serious, sustainable employment model, potentially indefinitely. Not 20 teachers for some publicity photograph. It's 20 teaching positions renewed as people retire, operate decade after decade. Over 50 years, that's over 850 teacher years. These are not abstract future generations. These people have got names. They have parents and families. They add to their community. They have problems as well, as do their students. Some of those students are going to struggle to read. Some are going to need a stable adult in their life. Some will discover mathematics, history, art, or science because one excellent teacher noticed something in them that nobody else had seen. A properly structured endowment could recruit excellent teachers, pay them properly, and place them in communities where continuity matters. That's what long-term thinking is, not imagining children who may not be alive in the year 12,026 while ignoring children who need help today. One clock or 10,000 lives. Let's compare the outputs of these. The clock produces a boing once a year. A teacher produces literate adults. A teacher helps a child understand the world they actually live in. The clock's bells may create a melody that's never been heard before and will never be repeated. Unfortunately, there'll be no one there to listen to it. Wonderful. I can barely contain my excitement about all of that. But a good teacher may say one sentence that changes the direction of a child's entire life. And that sentence might be repeated through that child's work, family, community for generations. You want a monument to the future? Employ a teacher. You want something that carries knowledge across centuries? Build a school. You want to connect the dead, the living, and the unborn? Well, that's what education's been doing since human beings first taught their children to speak 100,000 years ago. So civilization does not survive because gears keep turning. Civilization survives because knowledge is transferred from one human mind to another. But it's his money. Here comes the inevitable defense. It's Jeff Bezos' money. He can spend it however he wants. Yes, he can. I am perfectly happy with him spending his money how he wants. No one's accusing Bezos of stealing the clock money from a school district, after all. The Long Now Foundation also says its ordinary membership donations were not used for the construction of the Texas clock. Bezos funded the project, supplied the mountain, and is responsible for its resources. But it's his money does not end the moral or political argument. It simply begins it. Forbes currently places Bezos among the 4 richest people in the world. Recent estimates put his fortune at roughly $250 billion. In dollars is approximately 0.16% of his wealth. So to give you an idea of scale, for someone with a net worth of $1 million, the equivalent expenditure would be about $150. So a nice lunch. This clock is not a meaningful sacrifice for Jeff Bezos. In fact, I suspect he's never even noticed. But it's loose change enough to finance 20 teachers for generations. And that's precisely the issue. We've allowed individuals to accumulate extraordinary private fortunes. The personal curiosities can command resources comparable to public institutions. But this is no public vote. There's no benefit required. There's no measurable social target. There's no democratic priority setting here. A billionaire finds an idea interesting and hundreds of skilled people spend years making it happen. And here's the thing that really amazes me. Seriously, Bezos, you find this interesting? You're meant to be one of the most respected and clever business titans of our time. You really need to get out more. Meet a few real people. Have better ideas, because some of them I've got some news for you. Your present ideas are shit. But that's power. Enormous, unaccountable power. It's also rather pathetic. Does art need to pass any economic tests? This is not an argument that every work of art must pass an economic productivity test, or even be to the liking of the people seeing it, or in this case, not seeing it. Art does matter. Engineering beauty does matter. Human beings should be allowed to make strange, ambitious, magnificent, crazy things. So call the clock art. Call it an extraordinary engineering experiment. Call it Jeff Bezos' private monument to his own conception of time. Call it the most unimaginative vanity wank ever. Great, but do not dress it up as a serious response to humanity's inability to think long term. It doesn't redistribute decision making. It doesn't strengthen democratic institutions. It doesn't solve the incentives that make politicians and corporations behave recklessly. It does not even give future generations more power. It gives Jeff Bezos a big, useless clock. We increasingly allow billionaires to decide which diseases matter, which technologies deserve investment, which cities receive institutions, and which visions of the future become physical reality. Sometimes they choose well. Sometimes they decide to make a big fucking clock. But the fundamental problem remains. Decisions with society-based consequences are being made according to the interests, eccentricities, and personal whims of a tiny number of unelected people. What real long-term thinking looks like. Real long-term thinking is not measured by how long an object might survive. It's measured by how long its consequences survive. A Roman aqueduct was valuable because it carried water. A university is valuable because it creates and distributes knowledge. A vaccine program is valuable because people remain alive. A well-designed bridge connects communities for generations. And a teacher creates effects that continue long after the teacher has gone. The 10,000-year clock confuses physical durability with social value. I mean, a discarded plastic straw may survive for 10,000 years. That doesn't make it useful or interesting, it's just more trash. Meanwhile, a conversation lasting 10 minutes may direct an entire human life. Because longevity is not impact, it's simply longevity. Useful things get used and worn out and replaced with something better. The clock might actually survive because it has no purpose and will remain ignored and unmolested because of its utter irrelevance. What should change? We need to stop treating every billionaire obsession as a visionary simply because the billionaire can afford an impressive press release. We need more effective taxation of extreme concentrations of wealth. And when wealthy individuals claim that a project deserves humanity, we should ask the same questions we would of any public program. What's the objective? Who benefits? What alternatives were considered? How will success be measured? Because in my opinion at least, it makes people think it's not a sufficient answer to a $42 million question. The Foundation wants us to imagine that people who might be alive in 10,000 years from now and what they would think of this. Well, that's fine. So let's imagine them. I have zero idea, by the way, what they will know or what they will think about. No one does. But I'm 100% certain they're not going to give a shit whether Jeff Bezos' clock completed another mechanical cycle. And just imagine Bezos being transported somehow 10,000 years into the future. Do you seriously think anyone would ask him about a clock in a mountain? Or would they be more interested in asking why there are no elephants or orangutans, why climate change wrecked our societies, and why he and every other billionaire didn't do a damn thing to change those outcomes? Do you seriously think he's going to be well judged? I don't think so. Perhaps the clock means seen as a metaphor in a different way. Perhaps every billionaire who wants to consider their legacy should think, shall I build the most pointless thing imaginable, or shall I use my enormous resources to leave the world a better place than I found it? Because that's the measure, I think, of almost any billionaire. I think it's fair to say that most of them have lost their empathy. The clock is intended to chime for people who have not yet been born, but 20 great teachers could benefit changing people's lives this week. The clock is hidden inside a mountain, but teachers work in public. The clock's creators cannot tell us its final cost, when it will be finished, or how ordinary people will see it. But they are assuring us that it is making humanity think. I've got some news, boys. Actually, no. No, it isn't. It's making humanity look an extraordinarily expensive object and pretend that symbolism is a substitute for action. The 10,000-year clock is not a monument to our concerns for future generations. It's a monument to inequality and a terrible, boring idea. It's what happens when one man has enough money to turn a musing into an industrial project, while schools are being expected to host bake sales for basic supplies. And perhaps the most useful thing the clock will tell us is not the year. It tells us that billionaires have far too much money and far too much power and far too little responsibility. So if you want to make a difference in 10,000 years from now, forget the clock. Teach a child.